أحييته منا فأحيه على الإسلام ومن توفيته منا فتوفه على الإيمان. O my Lord, my graceful, kind, forgiving, merciful, loving Lord, have compassionate on this beautiful soul in a manner that he had compassion, forgiveness, goodness in his life. He was a model for every generation. Let his life lessons be a lesson for one and all. Have mercy on him, compassionate on him, love him, elevate him in the highest of stages, in the highest of honors. You are the most merciful, you are the most kind. Make it easy for those who he has left behind. Make it easy for all of us. Let it not be a test, rather let it be a lesson that we need to be better in our manners, in our character, in everything that we do, in everything that we say. We remember him for the beautiful soul that he was. Oh my Lord, you remember him. You let it be that every generation that is to come remembers him for the person that he was. Have mercy, love, and compassion, and special kindness and goodness towards him. You share this with him, O my Lord. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. آمين.
In 1929, Ahmed Kathrada was born into an Indian family in Schweizer-Reneke, where apartheid was the law of the land. At a young age, Kathy joined the struggle for liberation, risking his freedom for the rights for all South Africans. He ultimately faced the death penalty alongside Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu.
Kathy has been in every major political trial until he landed in jail in the Rivonia trial. 1946, 1950, 1952, 1956 treason trial, you name it, every national trial Kathy has been involved.
They were sentenced to life in prison and were sent to Robben Island. People the world over called for their release.
It was a microcosm of how apartheid applied in South Africa. I stayed in the cell for 17.5 years. If you stood here and looked out, not only can you see Cape Town, which is quite a distance, but the warders going to the harbor with their kids, that was the advantage of the cell. The main deprivation was children. You miss children. Mr. Mandela saw his two little girls when they were 2 and 3. And next time he saw them was when they were over 16. A prisoner never loses hope. Never, ever. Although we were sentenced to life imprisonment, and for political prisoners, life meant life. We want Robben Island to be a monument. One wants to perpetuate the positive aspects, and that is a place of triumph. Because Robben Island played a very important role in the struggle, although we were in prison. And the struggle to crush apartheid was in some ways less difficult than the struggle we are facing now.
After 26 years, Kathy and his comrades walked free, infusing the struggle with new hope.
Very good. When I had waited long, and we met again. It was a moving experience, and became very clear that nowhere in the world the human spirit can be destroyed by a tyrant or an oppressor.
6 months later, Nelson Mandela was also a free man. They negotiated an end to apartheid and set to work building a new nation. Prisoner Mandela became President Mandela. With Kathrada as his advisor, they chose a path of truth and reconciliation over revenge. old comrades worked with the young leaders to make their highest ideals the law of the land. Kathy taught people in South Africa and around the world about the history, triumphs and lessons of the journey to freedom. He is a vigilant champion of ethical standards and of racial equality.
He has been a great instrument of the movement. That is what he has brought, confidence in the future.
I found him to be a great fountain of wisdom.
He is a selfless person. He's made enormous contribution.
You know, he connects to the issues that affect us as ordinary human beings.
He has contributed significantly to our rainbow nation.
Ahmed Kathrada remained core part of the leadership of our struggle at the time.
Freedom to be achieved has to be fought for, has to be sacrificed. There has to be sacrifices. Freedom you don't get on a platter. Nobody has given freedom on a platter to anybody. It has to be fought for.
They had passion for what they were doing. They didn't do it for name and fame.
South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white.
They were very brave to make the kind of sacrifices that they made.
We are deeply grateful that today we live in a lively democracy.
But he's so warm and he's so humble for a person of his status and his legacy.
You'd expect someone of his stature to actually be proud and, you know, he'd want to be praised, but that is not who he is.
He's basically teaching us about non-racialism. It's an incredibly good heart in Kathy that I think most people recognize and respond to. And, you know, that is a privilege to live with someone with such a good heart.
His life is a legacy of an ongoing example of the unbeatable power of love and the triumph of the human spirit.
Good morning once again. Thank you again for joining us on this difficult morning. We are here with all of our hearts on the floor. We are saddened by the news today, and while we all recognize what a great loss we're experiencing, we must also realize that we have to celebrate the results of such a great life. As a young person in South Africa, I stand here before you completely grateful for the life that was Mr. Ahmed Kathrada. I'd like to personally send my condolences to his family and to everybody here today and to everybody around the world. It's a loss for every one of us. To start off the program officially, I'd like to please call the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Mr. Sello Hatang.
Thank you very much. I think Mr. K would have been disappointed with your your clap to Lunga. I think you can do better than that. You know, for Lunga to say that she's here as a young person, as a beneficiary, is important because it's because of the struggles of people like Mr. K that Lunga is able to stand here today. And I think as we celebrate Mr. K and as I welcome you, I want to remind you that today is not about being sad. It's actually a day to celebrate a life well lived. Mr. K lived his life to the fullest. He was a fighter to the very end. And to welcome you, I thought I should share an anecdote. An anecdote of something that happened, I think it was a year, maybe 2 years ago. I was at the French ambassador's home when he was with his fellow Rivonia trialists, Ntate Mlangeni and Ntate Goldberg. And the two of them were already there when Mr. K walked in. And he walked in as if to brag that he was not carrying a walking stick. And the other two were, Ntate Mlangeni at the time had just come out of hospital and was on a wheelchair. And Mr. K walked in, and earlier on I was sitting with the other two, and the two were now sharing about the pains and aches. So Mr. K arrives, and the story continues. Hey, Kathy, how are you? He says, no, I'm good, I'm good. And they start telling him all over again. So I've just come out of hospital. They've just fixed this thing, and that one has just fixed that. And so they check in with him. And you, how are you? He says, no, I'm good. In fact, I just did 5 kilometers, a 5-kilometer walk. I think he was bragging there, if you ask me. But that brag was important because it was saying to them, it doesn't matter whether you complain about your aches and pains, you must continue. So I asked them, if you have these aches and pains, with your advanced age, surely you should now be leaving it to us that we should run for you. And I think it's true to say that all three of them turned to me and said, well, for as long as God has given us this precious life, we will continue to run. And I asked them, why would you be involved in committees when we should be running for you? And again, it's true that they then said that, again, for all three of them, for them it meant that they will run until God takes life out of them. So my message to you today as I welcome you is to say that Mr. K is no more. That life that we knew is no more, but he will always be. So for us to become who we need to become, we need to just remember to celebrate that life, knowing that we don't reminisce about his past as if he's gone. But it's a Mr. K who live with those who are still to be born. And that those next generations can only celebrate him if we make the struggle real, that we deliver on education. Sean was telling us this morning about the militant Mr. K who went with us to the Feast Must Fall meeting at Vets. Again, that was a Mr. K who was already really walking slowly but saying, these young people need to know that we haven't delivered. And I'm here to tell them they must fight on so that the rest of us can deliver. So the expectation on us is that we will deliver on education, we'll care for the vulnerable in our society, particularly women and children, that the elderly must be looked after, but that we cannot do so if we don't remember the struggles that the likes of Mr. K put for us to be where we are. So those are my few words as I welcome all of you to the Nelson Mandela Foundation. Mr. K helped establish this very foundation. And for us, he was a proud member of the board until last year. And I'd like to pay a special tribute and thanks to Mayor Winnie Mandela, who's here. Thank you very much for coming through. I saw her yesterday. We were together at the hospital with Mr. K, and it was a sight that one didn't want to see. That's why I resisted for a long time to go and see Mr. K, because I wanted to have the memory of Mr. K, who was still doing 5 kilometers. And thank you very much for your continued support. Osenani, thank you so much again for being here. Marin Menel, one of our trustees, thank you very much for being here. Tate Hanikom. Sean, we are here to support you. And may you convey to Mebabra that her loss is not only hers. We join in that loss because South Africa has lost one of the greatest of its time. But that with his death, we will make sure that we continue fighting the good fight to help build a country of their dreams, but the country of those who are still to be born, that they might find it. Tate George Bezos, thank you very much for coming through. Prof. Tate Mula, thank you so much for coming through. And to all the veterans here present, the ambassadors here present, the Indian High Commissioner, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for coming through. The actors of Isidingo, as you know that Mr. K would be traveling wherever in the world, and he will demand that it be recorded for him, and to see the actors of Isidingo here to pay their respects. We thank you. So with those few words, welcome to the Nelson Mandela Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Hatang. If I could please call Mr. Nishan Bolton, who's the CEO of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation.
Thank you very much, and for that applause in advance. Respected elders, friends, colleagues, comrades of Uncle Kathy, we celebrate 75 years of activism. Kathrada started his life as an activist at the age of 12. And up until the end, I would describe him as still as being an activist. I first met him when he came out of jail, the very first day, the 15th of October 1989. Unfortunately for me, the day before that, we had a huge activist forum in Lens to prepare for his homecoming. And I got assigned to then be the security come driver, and I thought it was going to be a short while, but that continued for almost 4 to 5 years up until the 94 elections, and finally driving him to Cape Town to make sure that he's at Parliament and I could then leave him. Only to discover about 10 years ago, discussions around the establishment of a Kathrada Foundation started, and slowly his magnetism dragged me out of my job in the public sector to head up his foundation. It's been a privilege. It's been a privilege working with him since the day of his release. Uncle Kathy came out of jail finding it a completely new world, but very quickly adapting. When he went into prison, he was already a skilled typist, so to master the computer was no major exercise for him. His very first speech at FNB, he wrote himself on his computer. We cannot find that computer anywhere, but at least we have the audio recording of the speech. But he wasn't. He started to drive, and eventually wanted to drive on his own to Joburg. And one day came back drenched, completely drenched, him and all the fellow passengers. And I said, why didn't you guys roll up the window? He said, no, we couldn't find this winder thing that you wind up the window. Because this was by now automatic windows, you press a button and it goes up. And I had forgotten to tell him about those things. But over time, he became a master of technology. It wasn't on Facebook and Twitter, but Skype, he would be in conversations on Skype across the world with friends and family. This activism that we talk about is, we've now got from the last few years from the police services and the Department of Justice about 10,000 pages of declassified documents on Kathrada. And they consist mainly of police recordings of various meetings where he had spoken, so verbatim transcripts. I'm not going to read some of it here, but I can say that his militancy would make Julius look tame. When we release these documents at some point, you will see what I'm talking about. Militant to the core. But that militancy was disciplined. When it came to the point of needing to understand that negotiations was the route, he was persuaded, and that's what he then devoted his life to. Reconciliation and negotiations. But fundamentally, to Uncle Kathy are two things. It's the sense of activism, but living his life as well as working towards a non-racial society. Now, he loves this quotation from, I forget, Bernard Shaw or others. And when Bernard Shaw was asked, well, how do you solve the race problem in South Africa? Bernard Shaw says, well, let them marry each other. So marry them and then we don't have a problem. And he did precisely that. His relationship before he went to jail was with Sylvia Neem. Coming out of jail, his partner and wife, Barbara Hogan. And his personal relationship spanned the color line. He said to me it also spanned the religious line. I didn't get too much of the details, but I was hoping to do that at some point. His illness caught us by surprise. He had just completed had been at the event at Victor Verster to mark Madiba's release. It was something that he was very passionate about over the last few years. You know, he did all kinds of walks, the 702 walk, the Gandhi walk, the Constitutional Hill walk, as well as this, because it was his way of showing and demonstrating support for these things. But after that walk, he then was the first signs of his illness. So he spent, I think, 2 days at a hospital in Cape Town. But I think he had a foreboding that he needed to come home. So he insisted to Barbara, he wants to get home and he wants to go to his flat. So he got home mid-February and was really in bed for the better part of February. And treatment and all kinds of things. And we thought he was fine, recovering very well, until at a point when dehydration set in and he had to now go back and he went into Donald Gordon. And that's the first time that the doctors did the scan and they picked up severe blood clotting on the brain, extensively all across the left-hand side. That required surgery. But the one thing about Comrade Kathy, even in that situation, he wanted to consult. So we're sitting there and he says, I have to do this operation, but get me so and so. And at least about 10 odd people had to be brought because he had to consult with them. I said, look, do we have to fill FNB Stadium as well? So that you can consult the entire country. But even that decision, the major decisions of his life, would be done in consultation at some point with Walter Sisulu, with Madiba, and in his release with all kinds of people. There was very little that he would do without consulting first. When the Landmed Hospital wanted to name the hospital after him, he did a whole process of consultation within the foundation and everywhere else, and then eventually agreed on what they were trying to do. So that was something deeply entrenched into him. Many people were asking me in the last few days, what's his financial status? I can say up front, he didn't serve on any boards, he had no major shares in any particular company, and he declined much of those positions. He declined every board position, simply saying that because he could not add value to corporate world, we would not take it on. Many others would have done differently. So his illness, once the pneumonia set in the last 48 hours or 52 hours, the doctors then advised that his condition was deteriorating. But let me just share two things. Immediately after his operation, he was conscious. I went to see him, and in his soft way, the first thing he asked me is, what is the headlines in the Sunday Times newspapers, or all the Sunday papers? Because it's a tradition to read every paper, and there was deep desire to know what was going on. Obviously, the headlines that weekend was social development and the chaos and the mass in social development. I could not tell him about those things. So I changed the subject to other stuff. He then, before I left, started singing some of his own Afrikaans liedjies. For the last few years, we've had to download Sari Mare and all kinds of things because that was the tunes that he had grown up with. And every morning would play it full blast in the flat, I think until Barbara complained, so it toned down. But that was his life, was a deep appreciation for a wide variety of culture. This morning at at 3:45, he passed away. But that was after having had the bulk of his family visiting him yesterday, as well as many of his friends and political comrades. Others were making arrangements to come this morning, but they would not have had that opportunity. I think Auntie Sophie was there, Derek, Mawini, the Premier, and many others were there just to say their farewells. In his last few years in the foundation, Ahmed Kathrada has had a public life of over 200 public engagements a year, sometimes even more than that. And I thought this was strange until I started going through his diaries, or Rash and others were going through his diaries from 1990, and it was the same pace. His police records indicate in the 50s and early 60s is the same pace of activism. And that's really what continued throughout this period. His last message, audible message to the doctors on Human Rights Day, they were trying to put the drip back into him. And he fought it off. And the doctors say very clearly, they heard him saying, "I know my rights. Don't put this in." And they accepted, Human Rights Day, we can't do this to him. We'll do it as soon as he is a bit more at ease with this. So that's the richness of Kathrada's life. I mean, we don't have the whole day to really talk to you about every aspect that I would really like to share with you. The funeral arrangements are as follows. It will be a Muslim funeral. It was his expressed wish to have a Muslim funeral. It was also his expressed wish not to be put on life support. He had made it very clear that if it comes to that situation, please don't put me on a life support system, a ventilator. I want to go in the most dignified way possible. That was his expressed wish, and we carried that out. The funeral will be at West Park Cemetery at 10 o'clock. It will be preceded by a public tribute program organized and managed and hosted by the Kathrada Foundation, addressed by many of the members of the foundation. The main address will be by the former Deputy President Kgalema Motlanthe, will be chaired by Derek Hanekom, the chair of the board of the foundation. And then there will be other tributes from various other sectors there. It will be an interfaith service, culminating in a Muslim prayer and a Muslim burial. I think that's about what we can share at this point in time. Condolence books will be available at the Mandela Foundation, the Kathrada Foundation, the Office of the Premier, and other sites in the next day or so. I think just to conclude, Sello was right. The sense of social justice, unfinished work, places a huge responsibility on all of us. And we would be failing him and his generation if we don't stop the rot that is setting in today. Thank you very much.
Before we allow a few people to come up and give tributes and share their memories with Uncle Kathy, I'd like to call on Mayor Irene Manel, who serves on the Nelson Mandela Foundation board.
Let me please join Sello in thanking you all so much for being here on this day of, in a sense, celebration and, of course, sadness. Death is always like an amputation for those who are left behind. You keep reaching for the missing part, and it's simply not there. But Kathy will always be with us, the extraordinary man that he was, the man who was feisty and tough, and as Sean has said, an activist of deep commitment and deep anger and deep capacity to express that anger in a way that really impacted so many people. He was a very remarkable man. I feel so privileged to have served on this board with him for the few years that we had together. I didn't know him as well as most of you, but I knew him well enough to value the extraordinary soul that he was, the kindness, the empathy. One of the very, very few people who wrote in a way that made those of us from outside and from a different kind of life understand how that extraordinary survival, that moral survival that came out of Robben Island those many, many, many years, he was one of the few people to express it in a way that became understandable. I think what we are left with is this wonderful memory of an extraordinary man whose commitment to the values that we all share and all dream of seeing more accepted in this very, very turbulent world, not just here, but everywhere on this extraordinary globe, this wonderful and horrible globe of ours. The greatest tribute that we can give to the memory of Kathy is to continue to value his extraordinary commitment to the very, very, very best human values, and to not just passively remember and value and praise, but to become activists, or to continue to be activists in the strongest possible way, to preserve or to retain to the best of our capacity those values in the lives of everybody, every one of us in this country and in this world. Thank you for being here. Continue to treasure what Kathy meant to all of us and continue to fight for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ma. We're going to have a few people just share some memories with us, as I mentioned before. And of the people I call up, if you feel more comfortable speaking from your seat, please let me know. I'll bring a microphone to you. But similarly, just a word to the media, kindly stay where you are right now and allow people to speak freely wherever they're speaking from. The first of which we're going to ask to share some memories with us is Mamwini. Will you be coming up, or should I come to you? Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, so Mamwini has advised that we please call Her Excellency Mam Zenani Mandela.
Good morning, everybody. We are gathered here to celebrate the life of one of the most special men of the 20th and 21st century. Because his life truly matters, especially to those of us who appreciate the role that Uncle Kathy played in the fight for our freedom. Because it was a fight. Let no one ever tell you otherwise. Why else would he and others who took up the cause of our freedom have been so brutally locked up? Yes, for all his gentleness, Uncle Kathy was there in the trenches, because he was ever reliable, ever diligent, always committed. There are those people who come into your life and never leave, because they are truly special. They have what we like to call presence, that rare ability to loom large in our lives, so that their impact on us is multiplied 1,000 times over. Uncle Kathy belongs in this unique group. Let me state my regard for him in this way, so that it is clear just how highly me and my family regarded him. He was my other father. I have only the fondest memories of him, ever gentle, always self-effacing, but undoubtedly powerful. For many decades, he was one of my father's closest friends. At this crucial time in our country, it should be clear to all of us that we have to keep his and Tata's legacy alive through all of us. Let us honor what he and my father stood for by ensuring that their ideals remain a tangible part of this country's reality. For let us speak the truth today. Uncle Kathy is the last of a generation of men and women who fought so valiantly for the liberation of our country and still managed to practice what they preached, to walk the talk, which we now grasp is no easy task. So I call on each and every one of us to never forget the sacrifices they made for this country. For me, it is important to point out that Uncle Kathy was my best friend, brother, and confidant. I arranged for him to spend time with my dad during those final days. I love watching the two of them share jokes, reminiscing about the past, and it is one of my life's most abiding memories. Perhaps the real treasure of any man or woman's life isn't what they mean to their immediate family, but rather how many outsiders consider them flesh and blood. For Uncle Kathy, as it is for my father, it is abundantly clear that millions of South Africans consider them as relatives of the first order. And that, for me, mirrors so eloquently their very special political achievement. May our prayers be heeded for the special son of the soil. I thank you.
Thank you for those words to Her Royal Highness Mandela Dlamini. She's right when she says we all consider this group of people first family members. We recognize completely their impact, and we're very grateful to have had them be the people contribute to the world that we find ourselves in today. Up next, I'd like to please call Ntate Makura. No? Right. Not a problem. We are also joined by Ms. Sophie de Bruyn. Would you like to come up and share a few words with us?
Good morning, everybody. On Tuesday, I think it was on Tuesday, we gathered at Lily's Leaf for an interfaith prayer meeting for Ahmed Kathrada. And we never knew that we were going to stand here this morning, gathering here, speaking about him in the past tense. Kathy always used to say when something like this happens, that there are two things that we cannot avoid. The one is old age, and the other one is death. I stand here this morning to say a few words in memory of Kathy and how I knew him. That I first met him many years ago in the early 50s when I came from Port Elizabeth to Johannesburg under the Federation of SACTU, or the South African Congress of Trade Unions. We used to commute in those days to Johannesburg, Durban, back to Port Elizabeth doing our trade union work. And it was at a party that I met Kathy at the end of one of the conferences where I met him for the first time. And we've remained friends for all that time, friends and comrades. And I must say, all the attributes and the qualities that were spoken about him, every time, these qualities of commitment was already showing in those days. Commitment for hard work and for respect and for honesty. And I remember that he mentored us. We were younger than him. When I say we, some of the comrades are here this morning. Comrade Mosey is here that I've seen. I'm not sure if I've seen others like Comrade Abdullah Jassad and Comrade, the other comrades are not around anymore, but there are a lot of comrades that he mentored and guided, and he groomed us. And as much as Comrade Kathy was younger than the older stalwarts like Yusuf Dadu and Molvika Chalia and the Montinaikas, Dr. Montinaika, and all the giants of that time, Comrade Kathy being young amongst them, younger, he was always respected in their company, and they always listened to him. I also remember him for his kindness and for trying to get together the colored people in organizing us. The younger ones, he was very passionate about the Colored Congress. The Colored Congress was a weak Congress, but he tried his best with us to build the Colored Congress, and always asked that the colored youth should work together with the Indian Youth Congress. And those are some of the things that I remember, but also his kindness. And when I say his kindness, I mean that I was the Colored Congress organizer. And it was very hard because Colored Congress did not have any money. And so in African National Congress also didn't have any money. But we worked together, and we were based in West, Corner West and Market Street, in a basement that was given to the Indian Congress to do their operations from there. But the Indian Congress took us, the African National Congress and the Colored Congress, together into that basement. The Congress of Democrats had their own offices in town, in Johannesburg, and I had a little corner in the basement hall where I worked from, and late Comrade Thomas and Kobe had another corner with a desk where he worked from. And it was always the Indian Congress that assisted us financially and with everything else. And the kindness that I speak about is that because we didn't have funds in those days, things were very difficult. There was hardly anything that you got in as far as even a stipend. And if you got a stipend, it was very erratically. And I didn't know that Comrade Kathy was watching this, of me not eating or not having lunch. And quietly he arranged with Comrade Helen Joseph, who was the secretary of the garment, the white garment industry. And they had a canteen downtown. And he arranged with Stanley Lolland, who was the secretary of the Colored Congress, and between them they arranged that when the garment workers, the staff of the Medical Aid Society would have their lunch in this canteen, the auntie that cooked there would keep a plate of food for me so that I can at least have a staple meal for the day. And this is what he did. This was the arrangement that was made by him. And so I would walk from West Street right up, I think it was End Street, something like that, End Street. And there I would stand and wait for my lunch. If I see that the white staff is still busy, the auntie would say, show me that I must still wait. And when they have all left the room, then I have to go in and have my lunch there. That was a kindness that I know about Kathy. The other kindness that I want to also speak about was after I came from Port Elizabeth and I was situated in the offices in this basement that I'm talking about at my desk, and it was going to be the Christmas holidays. And Kathy came in and he looked at me and he said to me, but why is your face so long? What is wrong? And I didn't answer. And then he asked me again, is anything wrong? And at that point I just burst out crying. And he asked me, why are you crying? And I said I was crying because I won't be able to go home for Christmas. And he looked at me and he called late Babla Salucci, and I don't know who else he called. And they went and had a short discussion. And later on he came back and he said, yeah, some money. Go and buy yourself a ticket and go home for your holidays. And those are the kind of qualities that he had, qualities of kindness, integrity, hard work, commitment, always striving to see that us young ones do our work, reminding us of our chores, whatever it was. It was at his flat at Colbert House, 13 Colbert House, where we would gather in the evening, if Mosey can remember, with our buckets of paint, going to the road in the dark of night to paint on the bridges of Johannesburg, whatever slogans we were told to paint there. And we would get back in the dead of night or early morning back to his flat. And I feel that Colbert House number 13 hasn't been given any prominence because that was a flat, Colbert House building, 3rd floor, number 13, where all the important discussions took place, most of it. Monty Naiker, Dr. Dadu, sometimes Chief Latuli, would come to Johannesburg in the afternoon or late afternoon, and they would go to number 13 Colbert House and discuss and deliberate. And then they would cross over from Colbert House to Market Street, round the corner from Colbert House. And there in the basement, the other comrades would have gathered, and there they would take the decisions that they have discussed upstairs at number 13 Colbert House. So those are some of the things that I remember. The work that he was involved in, his greatness, his respect. But he was also a very measured person and very discreet. That is what he was. But out of all of that, he was also a jolly person. He tried to learn to dance, and he had 2 left feet. And he also liked a party, but a private party, not a great party. And Kathy's kindness went right out to all of us younger ones. There was a Dr. Abu, and they owned a cinema in Fortsburg. And Kathy would organize for tickets without us knowing, because the cinema belonged to the doctor's family. And he would say to us, here are tickets. A whole 2 rows would be reserved for us. And he had many connections. Everybody loved him. And we will remember all his qualities of hard work and integrity and commitment and dedication. And the popular thing that goes around now, which says he wasn't afraid to speak to power. He was like that from his young days, not mincing his words with anything that he didn't approve of. If he didn't like it, even if you were a grown-up or an older person, he would say it to you, but he would say it with respect. And I think as we are gathered here this morning, we should go away with the memories, all these very good memories, the way we know him, the way we have brushed shoulders with him, the way we've loved him and the way he loved us. And I want to say to Barbara, to Barbara and the family, which I've already passed our family's condolences to them, I would like to say to them that they mustn't mourn, but they must remember Kathy's life. Keep those good memories of him and remember him in that way. Kathy was a person that loved young people, and he spoke many times to the young people that they must inculcate his life, because the young people are facing a very difficult time. Our country is facing a very difficult time. But it is the young people who are the future generation that will have to be put up with what is happening today in our country. And it is them that are going to have to fight another struggle. But I think we and Kathy will be happy in the knowledge that what that generation have worked for, strived for, died for, has not been in vain. Because already we can see the results of that, what they strove for. In the education that the young people has taken upon themselves, and their choices that they are making. And we are very proud and happy. And sometimes I get a lump in my throat from happiness just to experience when I'm around them how gifted and talented they are. And that is what we want from them. And we can be happy to know that the struggle that they are going to have to fight, they are going to be more equipped, more educated, because they are going to fight it digitally. The kind of resources that we didn't have. And because they are going to be doing it much smarter. Thank you very much.
No, it's fine. You can keep it. Thank you very much. Everyone here has talked of traits and parts of Mr. K's personality that we ought to all treasure and try our best to emulate. And those deserve celebration. And we are here in part to mourn, but definitely to celebrate a life dedicated to purpose. So just to bring our spirits up a little bit, we're going to have one more item from the Soweto Gospel Choir. You guys ready?
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Oh, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Lilo, Lilo, potem matacie, oh, Lilo, potem matacie, Lilo, potem matacie, Lilo, potem matacie. Sure you need it now. Sure you need it now. Sure you need it now. If you ever needed the lights before, sure you need it now. We need it every day and every hour. If you ever needed the lights before, sure you need it now. Sure you need it now. Sure you need it now. If you ever needed the lights before, sure you need it now. We need it every day and every hour. In the morning, 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 in the day, in the day, in the evening, in the evening, in the evening, and when my heart arrives, in the morning, 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 in the day, in the day, in the evening, in the evening, in the evening, and when my heart, oh glory, yeah. Sure you need it now. Sure you need it now. Sure you need it now. Never needed the night before. Sure you need it now. We need it every day, every hour. Never needed the night before. Sure you need it now. Sure you need it now. Sure you need it now. Never needed the night before. Sure you need it now. We need it every day and every hour.
Thank you very much. The next few messages from people who are going to speak to us, I'd like to request are a bit brief. We'd like to close, or rather wrap up the official part of the program and allow everybody else here to perhaps say something from their heart as well. So briefly, Ntate Bizos, I'm going to bring the mic to you as you requested.
Thank you. As I have already spoken, I will be very brief. Kathy was probably the smartest accused and the smartest prisoner that the regime had to deal with. He would not dissociate himself from the other accused in the Rivamia trial. He refused to point out anything done by any of the other accused. And the prosecutor tried very hard to actually get him on their side. He definitely rejected it, and he was one of the smartest clients that Bernard Berger, one of my seniors, that actually paid special attention to his trial. He managed to get him out of 4 counts, but he couldn't get him out for the 2 counts. And I have already said, but for the benefit of those who came a little late, he is the one who actually told the prosecutor in no uncertain terms, don't expect me to say anything that will help you get a conviction against my comrades. Finish your clock. He was also, after his release, at the end of '89, very caring in reporting to the people that were left behind, and more particularly to Mawini, because Nelson Mandela, when the others were free, he said, as I have said long ago, I want to be the last political prisoner that is...
All of us in South Africa. It's another giant of our democracy, of our freedom, who has departed. And we all feel so hugely deprived of this man who sacrificed so much, who gave so much. He was in prison for 26 years and he was only free for 27 years. And for this, we see a person's life which was just dedicated to making sure that our people are free, making sure that we have this democracy. And he's one of those who, out of sheer total commitment, selfless commitment, gave his life to the freedom of our people. A man of great integrity, a humble person, a person who was honest to his core, who wanted our freedom to be based on great values, values of great integrity, great honesty, and a person who lived his life by the words that he always articulated. And he always put our people first. So today we are in great sadness, but we also celebrate a great life. And we will always remember Uncle Kathy. He's leaving a great legacy, a legacy that we will try to emulate. We will try to emulate his commitment, his example. And I particularly remember him for the great fondness that he had for young people. And it is the young people of our country who must remember Uncle Kathy and try to walk in his footsteps. So we look forward to paying greater tribute to him at the funeral and also at the memorial.
Mr. Deputy President, you've just met Barbara Hogan, his wife. In what state is she right now?
Well, Barbara Hogan, his partner, is sad. Naturally, she loved him so much, and she's filled with deep sadness. But at the same time, she's being comforted by many people who are coming to pay their respects and their tribute to Uncle Kathy. So she is being comforted in a very wonderful way. But she is sad because this is a terrible loss to her as well.
Deputy President, Uncle Kathy, obviously, as many people affectionately know him.
Comrades and friends, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to say a few words. Kathy and I lived in Colbert House. He was on the third floor, I was on the first floor. But we became co-accused in the first treason trial, 1956 to 61. I want to just give you a few anecdotes about Kathy. He had a good sense of humor. Once we were putting up posters, and the posters were being put up by what is known as the Picasso Club. We had one poster left, and we passed the old Van Willert Street headquarters of the special branch. So Kathy dared Babla Saluji, the late Babla Saluji, who was thrown down the building, who was tortured, and said, I dare you to put up this posters. So he said, no, I'll do it. He put up the posters. Now we, like idiots, decided to take a turn to come and check whether the poster is still there. You know? And the police immediately gave chase. And we happened, and they cornered us at the old Coliseum. And there, the policeman that was chasing us looked at the number plate, the registration card, and he said, whose car is that? So Kathy got up and said, it's mine. He says, hot, a G van Schweizer. He says, yes. He said, now listen, you chaps. You go ahead, put up your posters, but don't put them up on public buildings. And that was the first time that the Picasso Club was able to distribute the posters without looking over their shoulders whether the police are coming at all or not. We were co-accused in the treason trial. And at Pretoria Central, every morning...
The life and contribution of Comrade Kathy, I think more importantly, he left with the same resilience and dignity that he lived. My personal contact goes back to 1985 when I was detained in solitary and I was held in Portsmouth. And he slipped past my cell, said hello to me, asked me to be strong on his way to the hospital, and then the following day sent me a poem. So it's a long relationship that now spans 32 years. But when I speak to many of the people around, his old friends and comrades, that 32-year relationship is short. But I think he treated everybody in quite the same way, with dignity and strength. And he's been a particular pillar of strength. Some of the stories that he's been able to recount through life, just sitting and sharing information, sharing values very importantly, and that I think is a big struggle for us. It's not the political struggle, it's a struggle for values, and I think Uncle Kathy represented that in large doses. And so it's that we'll miss. It's a generation of leadership, of people who took responsibility and struggle not for position, but in order to impact on the lives of others. And so in mourning his passing, I think we mourn the coming to an end of that generation, because there are still others around. There are few. The other two Rivonia trialists, there are people like Mac Maharaj of the second generation, Lalu Chiba, but the numbers are becoming fewer and fewer, but the battle for values is becoming greater, because the sideshow of money and the feeding trough is becoming too big. And so we need to replicate those skills and the strength and the resilience and the voice of people who will say no to that and understand what Batupili means. It means always putting our people first. It means tilting our policies in the direction of our people and being committed to have our policies measured against the objectives that we set. And that's what I think Uncle Kathy represents to all South Africans. It's strong, it's resilient, it's non-racial, it's non-sexist, it's driven by the best values amongst us. And so I think we dip our banner and say thank you very much for the inspiration, the leadership and the example, the living example that Ahmed Kathrada was to each one of us.
Mr. Manuel, what a page from the leadership of Mr. Kathrada that not only young South Africans but leaders of today can take out of that book of life of him.
You know, I think that there'd be a few of these things. Well, one of them is that when he came out of prison after 26 years, he tells this funny story because he had this self-deprecating humor that when the general called them and said that they're going to be released, he got a fax that morning. Everybody was excited about being released. Uncle Kathy asked, "What's a fax?" It's a funny story, but as he settled into life, he's grappling with technology so that he could tell stories. His life at the computer, his determination to apply most things. There are some things he didn't achieve. Driving after all those years became too difficult for him in Joburg, but in most issues, he didn't allow the separation to become an obstacle to what needed to be done. The tirelessness in his commitment to share. In the last year, I think he had about 200 engagements before he went into hospital. Now, these are meetings with people, they're addressing people, they are...
Nature might stand up and say to all the world, this was the man. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I please call on a good friend of Ndata Kathrada, Mom Barbara Masekela?
I'll be very brief. I just thought that when we are asked to speak about somebody who's left us, we always speak about ourselves and not the person, because it is about how that person affected your life and in a way contributed to what you are. But I just thought I'll take this opportunity to ask everybody here, especially the young people, to go to their computers and look for a newspaper called New Age. The New Age newspaper. I was a teenager, I had matriculated, and I had opposed my parents and said, I'm not going to a Bantu university. So I was waiting that year to be accepted at Roma College in Lesotho. So a friend of my mother's, who was a trade unionist, I had been working in a factory for about 6 months, and it was unbelievable. I had no idea what it meant to work in a factory. That year that I worked in that factory, it was there were dresses that were in fashion that had a little, small band to hold the dress up. And my job was to turn over these straps all day. By the time I got home, my hands were so sore, but I had to go back again. And all I did was to turn these strips so that they could then be sewed to the dresses. Anyway, my mother's friend said, no, I think that there is a job at New Age, and I'm going to take Barbara there. So I was taken to New Age, and I got a job in the subscriptions department of New Age newspaper. And my boss was Wolfie Kodesh. And that is where I met Kathy, where I met Comrade Kathrada. And whenever I used to see him, especially if there were other people around, I would remind him how handsome he was, how aloof he was, how serious he was. I mean, we were teenagers working in the subscription, and we couldn't believe that anybody could be that serious. And we couldn't, we were trying to imagine what his private life was like, and we couldn't, you know, because he just seemed to be somebody who was so single-mindedly devoted to the struggle. That is all. He was single-mindedly devoted to the struggle. And I wish, it's an empty wish, I wish that Comrade Kathy had left us at a happier time. I wish I could say that he was smiling about South Africa when he left us. But it is not so. And I think that's why we feel he's going so deeply, because we loved him and we wanted him to be happy. And I don't think we can say he was. I think all his actions in the last years of his life illustrated his disappointment at the outcome. But like the soldier he was, he continued striving for a better life. We have been a very lucky generation, I think. I think I belong to a very lucky generation, because we have had the opportunity to experience the most courageous, the bravest, the most fearless, the most eloquent, the most selfless leaders. And among them was Comrade Kathrada. And I remember as a teenager, us looking the office, we were on the side of the office there in the dark, and so we could see everybody coming in. And every day we saw Ruth first, because she was the editor. Every day we would watch them arguing, discussing with Kathy. We would see Governor Mbeki come in. I can't really repeat the list, you all know them, but they all were there. And those were our heroes. And we could touch them and feel them and talk to them. And I think because of that, all of us have been very privileged. And I agree with Comrade Sophie de Bruyn that we have a new generation of people. And perhaps we expect them to fight in the same way that the older generation did. They can't. They will not, because they did not have the experiences that we did. But I hope that from time to time, they will go back and look at our hero. And especially, I hope that they will look at a newspaper called New Age, which fought for the rights of the people, which gave us another perspective of the independence movement in Africa, because all the other newspapers were telling about the raping and the riots and whatnot, but the New Age put it into perspective and told us what was happening in what we may not then have considered our own lives, but which was our own lives, because we have since discovered that there is no way in which we can look at ourselves as apart from the rest of the world, which is struggling up to now. And Comrade Kathrada, Comrade Nelson Mandela, and all the other comrades, one of the greatest things that they did is to show us that we are part of the human race, that we are not experiencing something that is different from the rest of the human race. They helped us to see ourselves as human beings first. Hence, their conviction that nothing would work in South Africa except a non-racist, non-sexist, democratic, united South Africa. Rest in peace, Comrade Kathy.
Thank you very much, Me. I'd like to call on the High Commissioner of India, to give us a brief reflection as well.
Thank you so much. All the elders of the struggle, eminent dignitaries present here today, distinguished South Africans, members of the media. I have known Ahmed Kathrada for the 2.5 years that I have been in South Africa. And yet, I have some lovely memories of him. But I feel that given my short exposure to him, it is perhaps unfair of me to take a lot of your time, because all of you are replete with memories that you have shared with him over a lifetime. To me, being with Ahmed Kathrada was like being with history, because he was not a bystander. He was not an observer. He wasn't a student or a reader of history. He contributed to the making of history. And it was an amazing thing to see how disarmingly innocent he was, because he never showed any indication that he understood what a great man he was. That is how I would remember him. And I'm sure all of you would remember him with equal affection and fond memories. India has been a privileged partner of South Africa in its struggle against apartheid. We have been happy to have stood with South Africans in this struggle every step of the way. We are all proud in India of the contribution that has been made by Ahmed Kathrada to this struggle. In this hour of grief, in this difficult time, as your friend, we stay by your side as your friend. Every younger generation has to struggle to make a better tomorrow for themselves and their future generations. But I think in South Africa, the younger generation is extremely fortunate and privileged that they have the legacy of the lives likes of Ahmed Kathrada to build upon. I hope his values and his life will be cherished just as we cherish him today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We have two more speakers, and if I could ask that when they get here, they try their best to be brief. Could I please call on Rashan Dadu, who is the daughter of Yusuf Dadu?
Thank you. Well, I actually didn't know Uncle Kathy for most of my life. And in fact, for most of my life, I never thought that I would meet him. I was born after the days that other comrades have described here. Auntie Sophie, Uncle Mosi, Auntie Barbara, where my mum worked in the New Age office, and described how Uncle Kathy had worked with my dad and the other comrades of the day. I was another generation, now an old generation, but still younger than their generation, born in exile in London, where we didn't have any family. There was me and my mum and dad, but I knew that I had all these uncles in a prison on an island in South Africa. And of course, Uncle Kathy was one of them. And my mum used to make me write letters to the prisoners, and particularly to Uncle Kathy. And I hated doing it because I never knew what to say. I thought that they'd be jealous and upset if they knew about me, this little girl, you know, living free out of prison, running around. Of course, later I learned that they loved getting these letters, of course, and hearing about the children of their comrades and friends. But I used to write these letters about what I was doing, what I did at school. And then there'd always be, my mum would say, and you must say, and there'd be like a phrase. And only years later, I realized it must have been a kind of a, not a code, you know, like there was some meaning. She'd say, you have to say, Mummy and Daddy are doing fine, you know, in spite of it all, or some phrase like that. Which, yes, so I realized much later in life, of course, that there was more than my little letter going on there. But I never then thought that I would meet Uncle Kathy in person. And of course, when I did, it was wonderful. He had such a good sense of humor, and he told me many stories about those days and the parties and the goings-on politically and in the social life of the comrades, because I think it's important to remember that he was a person who understood people, who loved people, and I think that is why he connected across generations with my generation, and of course more recently with younger people. And in fact, one of the last times I saw him was on the Fees Must Fall demonstration in Pretoria, where he emerged out of the tear gas, and there was a water cannon going by. And at that moment, I saw Uncle Kathy walking with Shan, strolling along the pavement, chatting to the young students and people that were there. So, of course, I went to greet him. But what other leader would do that? What other leader of ours would have the courage of his own convictions to support the students and to speak with them, to try to understand their ways of struggle, what their demands were, and to support their demand for free education? When my dad died, of course, it was many years ago, and Uncle Kathy was in Poolsmoor. He wrote a very lovely letter in which he described my father. He said he was my leader, my colleague, my father, my older brother, my guide, my mentor, my friend. And I think that those are words that now me and many, many of us here would apply to Uncle Kathy. So I want to say I think we really must learn and remember his example, because he wasn't just a leader, he was a man of principle. And I think that's where we have to take our cue. People earn leadership, earn respect from people. And unfortunately, many of our current leaders have lost my respect and the respect of many, I think, of my and indeed older generations. And we can't shy away from this. We can't gloss over this and pretend this isn't going on. And I think one of the best ways we can remember Uncle Kathy is to think about him and how he stood out for what he believed in regardless, in the hardest of times, which were both then when he was in prison in the island in the early days, but also now. I think these were very, very hard times for him, to have struggled his whole life for an ideal and still see people he thought were comrades and friends making decisions and doing things that can only be described as against what he had stood for. And so I think that's why he could connect with other generations. It wasn't about age. It was about having that belief in principles, in values, being able to rethink and think again and think, what do we need to do now? Not resting on laurels, not accumulating stuff for himself. People have mentioned his humility and his lack of showing off and being aggrandizing about himself and the role he played. And I think that's something we must never forget, and particularly at this very moment, and not be afraid to call out those leaders who are not doing that, who are no longer our leaders. Hambagachle, Uncle Kathy.
Lastly, I'd like to please call on somebody from the Isidingo cast. As Sean mentioned earlier on, Mr. Kathy made a big deal of making sure he never missed an episode. And I know that you guys know that, and that is why you're here, and you had some level of relationship with him, so it's only fitting that we hear from you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Good morning to you all. Yes, Uncle Kathy was a huge fan, and he made every attempt to watch the show and took every opportunity to remind us that he was always watching. Isn't it fitting that we are here today at the Nelson Mandela Foundation to remember Uncle Kathy? These were comrades, brothers in arms. They stood side to side, they fought side to side, they served time together. And now, there is a reunion of sorts going on. And I can imagine Madiba and Uncle Kathy and many others joining in with their recollections of what it was at the time that they led us to freedom. Also, this is a center of memory. This is a repository of all those amazing moments in time in our history that have become the basis on which we are building a country, and we still do that even today. It was the occasion of Uncle Kathy's 80th birthday that we remember Sam decided, with her very mischievous idea of hers, that she was going to get Uncle Kathy onto Isidingo because that was his favorite show. And she arranged it with Pumla, our executive producer, who's here today, and said, let us feature him in a scene on Isidingo, and it's going to go out as part of the normal episode. And so it was written. And Uncle Kathy arrived, and we had the script ready for him. Not that he cared. Because we had Kim Engelbrecht in the scene with us, and you know where his eyes were. He decided that he was just going to have fun with the scene. And it can be very daunting for anybody walking onto the set of Isidingo or any of the big soapies in the country. It's a very professional, very technical environment. But he was just himself. And he just enjoyed the moment. And the lights were on and the cameras were all around him. And we did a quick rehearsal. And he was kind of there, but also not. And we were wondering, oh my goodness, how many takes are we going to do? And we went for the first take, and he nailed it. I can tell you now, he made up his own lines. And they were spot on, every one of them. And it was a long scene, a 2-page scene, and he wasn't intimidated at all. He had so much of fun. When we had called cut, he was about to walk away. And we had to call him back and say, Uncle Kathy, we have to do another take. And he says, why did I do something wrong? And we said, no, this is... It's not that you were actually perfect. He says, oh, it must have been the cameras then. It's amazing to think, as a professional actor, in my career, I can count a number of roles that I've played. But for Uncle Kathy, some of the roles that he played were actually all about life and death. The stakes were that high. There were times that he had to hide, to disguise himself, and lived for many years hiding from the security police. He had to grow a beard and wear dark glasses very often and have long hair in order to change his look, because the police identicates had him in the way that they remembered him. That was the role that you had to play. and he had to do it convincingly. In fact, he was known as a Portuguese person. Now, quite how he could pull off that role, I have no idea, because I'm still battling trying to play an Indian. But he was absolutely incredible. And there were so many roles over the years when it was demanded of him as a true loyal comrade, he would play the role of a leader, of a fighter, of a teacher, and of a guide. When he needed to play that role, yes, he was a prisoner as well. And when he came out of that role, again he resumed his role as leader, teacher, and guide, always living by a code, carrying his dignity about him as an example to others of how to stand up against injustice, how to make yourself heard, how to speak truth to power. And he continued doing that. Even up until the last days of his life, he knew when something needed to be said. And I wanted to remind the elders in our room today, yes, you have in your company those of the younger generation who will fearlessly keep that torch burning in his name, in his honor, because we too have a need to speak truth to power, to fight against the injustices, and to remind our leaders of today that there were those who were just a few, like Uncle Kathy, who believed in service through sacrifice. And that's what we will continue in his name. He's one of the few. On behalf of the cast, the crew, the production of Isidingo, we want to extend our deepest sympathies to the Kathrada family, and their friends, and the many, many colleagues. He will be remembered as one of the few. Thank you.
We are wrapping up the program. I'm going to call back to the podium the CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Mr. Sello Hatang. But from me, once again, condolences to the family. But thank you, Mr. K. Thank you for your selflessness, your humor, your standing with principles throughout your whole life. It's done a world of difference for me and many others like me. So tomorrow, when you all attend the funeral and however else we remember him, please rest assured to his comrades and to him and his family that, like was just said just now, we will do everything in our power to stick to him as an example in our daily lives. Thank you very much for coming this morning.
Thank you very much, Lunga, for having run this program so ably. I know that most of us would have wanted to say a word, and it's impossible to do so with the many who actually should have said something. I'd like to recognize at this moment people who are in the audience who should have had a moment to say so, and all of you who should have. I'd like to recognize Mark Haywood, who and the civil society organizations that are here, leaders of our civil society. To also mention that the Luthuli Foundation, the Chief Albert Luthuli Foundation also released a statement earlier on about this moment. Advocate Dumisa Ntsebeza, who's here with us, Premier Makura, MECs here present, so a couple MECs here present, Professor Khosi Tsile, who's here in front, Justice Yakub, who is a friend and also a neighbor of Mr. Case. So the blow must be double for you, because that knock will not happen again, because Mr. K is no more. And your wife, thank you very much for coming through. Deputy Minister Makwetla, thank you very much for being here, and all government officials who are here present. Bishop Mpumlwana, one person who would have mentioned that Uncle Kathy is now going to the other side to be that ambassador of hope from the other side. Former Minister Bridget Mabandla, the Diplomatic Corps, Tate Mandalanga, and then many others who are here. We would like to thank you very much. Kath, Hlubi, thank you very much for being here. Nelson Mandela called him a person of strong opinion and sharp insight. To all of us at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Ahmed Kathrada is more than a hero of the South African liberation struggle. He is Mr. K. a lovable and loving friend of the Nelson Mandela Foundation and Madiba for 67 years, and a long-time friend of the NMF. Having served Mr. Mandela as his parliamentary councillor for 5 years of his term as president. Mr. K was a familiar figure at our offices. He knew our names, treated us each as people with great value. He knew how to make us laugh, and he knew how to make each one of us feel special. We went to him for assistance whenever we saw needed. And in fact, worth remembering for the staff of the Nelson Mandela Foundation is when he took us to Robben Island and gave us a treat, an absolute treat of going through the Section B of Robben Island. Mr. K liked to give us gifts. Often when he had been given sweets, if you didn't know that, we were the beneficiaries. And those chocolates and delicacies, we enjoyed each one of them on his behalf. So he'd send them to us and say, share them. When he retired from our board, instead of us giving him a gift, he then gave each staff member and trustees a signed copy of of his books as a gift. That was the generosity of the man. We will never again see him walking through our doors with his characteristic careful, slow walk that he was always calculated, every move. When he gets to the stairs, he says, no, don't hold me as long as I can hold on the other side. We'll never again hear his gentle voice greeting us and teasing us about all manner of things. All our hearts broke when we heard Mr. K delivering his eulogy on the occasion of Madiba's passing, calling him his elder brother. He said, my life is in a void and I don't know who to turn to. Mr. K, our lives are in a void and we also don't know who to turn to with your passing. In fact, these were the words of Madikizela Mandela last night when we saw each other at the hospital. We'll turn to all your memories that you left us. We'll treasure the moments we had with you, and we promise to live up to your legacy. As you get to the other side, we want you to tell Dulcie September, to tell Ruth Mompati, to tell Steve Biko, Ruth First, Walter Sisulu, Irene Mukwai, Raymond Klaba, Govan Beki, Joe Slovo, Lillian Goy, and many others. Tell them that you left people who won't let them down, people who will fight to the bitter end to make sure that those values that they held dear will be carried through. Tell them that we will fight for a non-racial country, one that won't be xenophobic, because that's one thing that you felt strongly about, that one that will be non-sexist, but also one that will be corruption-free. Tell them that we are here to finish the work for you. I'd like to now urge you to please watch the video with us, and then at the end we'll then sing the national anthem. Thank you very much.
We're coming down in the lift, and a young lady of about 9 or 10 came in. And you said, how are you? How is my sister? And this young lady said, you'd be very proud if you had a sister like me.
Yeah. But those little children were very political.
Yes, of course.
Whenever they saw a white person coming into that building who was not known, any white person that the children did not recognize, they assumed must be a policeman. So as soon as that white person entered, they were waiting for the lift, these children would run up the fire escape and warn, uncle, uncle, police. So they were very political. In 1960, after Owak Tambo was sent abroad, you started practicing from the flag.
Yes.
Every day after treason trial and during adjournments, you used to have your law practice from there.
Now you remember, one day there came a chap who was blind in one eye. But you objected with that very forcefully. And we had to look for another office because I don't know why you hated this chap so much.
No, he was very rude. Very, very rude. He just dismissed me and very rude to me. So I must have reacted angrily also if he was reacting, because there were so many of your clients that were coming there.
Yes, fine. Who is now building Culvert House?
The flat is still in my name.
I see.
But you remember Amin Kaji?
Yes.
Who took you to Botswana when we smuggled you out when
Yes,
you,
correct.
when you went
I remember very well.
when I was under house arrest and I couldn't get visitors, Amin was working somewhere else. So I called him back. I said, please come here because I'm not allowed to have visitors. You must take responsibility for my visitors. So he took responsibility. And when I went underground, I left the flat to him.
I see.
So we are still going into some sort of recognition. I'm told that some representation has been made to Palo to declare it a heritage site.
I see, that was good.
Yeah.
Well, those were interesting times.
Yes.
I hope the records will be accurate because it shows what other groups did for all of us.
Yes. And your close relationship with Ismail Mir and Jayan Singh did help politically as well.
Yes, those days to have something with members of other race groups was very dangerous.
Yes.
What we did.
Because you people, being law students, a lot of discussions, and at that time the Youth League was still not in favor of cooperation. And you may still remember a meeting, informal discussion rather. Ismail, JN, yourself, Oliver, and Walter. And at that time the Youth League's attitude was non-cooperation with the other organizations. And then at that informal meeting, Walter broke ranks. And Walter said, no, there's a lot of merit in what these chaps are saying about cooperation. On your way to the station, that time there were no motor cars. You and Orr were so angry with Walter, so Walter was walking on one side of the pavement and you people on the other side. That came from the flat after discussions. But eventually, because one thing we have always stressed, although the Youth League had this attitude, it was not a racist thing. It was more exclusivist. And you had your own reasons, but not racist. Because you're close friends with these chaps. Yeah. Now this is myself. At that time I was occupying the flat. Ismail had already qualified as a lawyer and he had left. Jayan had left and I was now occupying the flat.
In closing, I would like everybody to please stand up as we say Hamba Kahle to Dr. Kathy and sing the national anthem with us. Thank you.
South Africa, 80 blauw van onze hemel, 80 diepte van ons ziel. Voor ons eeuwige geberg, united we shall stand. Let us live and strive for freedom in South Africa, our land.
Thank you very much. That is the end of today's program. Those wishing to do media interviews, please come to me first. Thanks for letting me. Thank you.
Tula sizwema, tula sizwema, unaboka, Jehova, uzobunqobela. Tula sizwema, tula sizwema, unaboka.
Well, good afternoon to you. If you've just joined us, you're with special coverage here on SABC Channel.